Taming the High Cost of College, Episode 74.
You have kids, they grow up, and before you know it, it's time to plan for college.
Where do you start?
How much is it going to cost?
Will you qualify for financial aid?
Should you be looking into scholarships?
When will you be able to retire?
What about student loans?
The list of questions is never ending. The good news is, all the answers are right here. Welcome to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Here is your host, certified financial planner, Brad Baldridge.
Hello, and welcome to Taming the High Cost of College. I'm your host, Brad Baldridge. Today we have a solo show where I'm going to talk a little bit about how college planning should start for many families. So if you're just getting started into the college planning, or if you have a high school sophomore or junior, and you're trying to figure out if you're on track or what you should be doing first, this show is for you. We're going to talk about visit planning, test planning, a scholarship plan, and then ultimately a financial plan around college. So those are the four key areas that families need to work on in order to get organized and start the college planning process. Now, if you have a high school junior, and we're recording this in March, so if you have a junior right now, hopefully you're well underway with all four of these plans. If not, you really need to listen and pay attention and get to work. If you have a high school sophomore, you've got a little more time, but it is certainly now is a good time to start thinking about it and start working on it. And of course, if you have a freshman or less, I still encourage you to listen, start learning the language, start learning about college, and use this information to kind of take the pressure off and learn about college going forward. So let's go ahead and jump into the information. I appreciate you guys listening. As always, we've got show notes at tamingthehighcostofcollege.com. All right, today I wanted to talk a little bit about how families need to organize their thoughts and start working on a kind of a more formal college plan. And this is the material I talk with families about right after they hire me to help them with their college planning. So as I sit down with clients, and the first meeting typically, we start talking about what they need to do now. Now, typically I'm talking to parents of sophomore or juniors, and they're trying to figure it all out. And essentially the very first step that families need to understand is they need to assess three plans that they need to work on. I've mentioned in the past, and I've mentioned many times, that college planning is really kind of an amalgamation of many different college plans all at once. In other words, you need to have a plan for testing and making sure you're doing the right things in high school and keeping your grades up and the finances and testing and all those types of things. So there's lots of different areas that you can work in. And what I found is for most families, you really need to focus on the four key plans here. You need to work on the visit plan, a test plan, scholarship plan, and then ultimately the college financial plan, or the financial side of college. All four of those areas are kind of where families need to start. They're the things you can do early on, and they all are important as you move farther and farther into the plan. So let's go ahead and talk about each of those areas. So again, it was visit plan, test plan, scholarship, and financial plan. So if we talk about the visit and the test plan, the whole purpose of the visit plan and the test plan is to support our creating the school list. Realistically, part of college planning is figuring out which college your student is ultimately going to attend. And most people are trying to figure out, well, how do we find a school that's a good fit? And most families are looking for a good fit as far as academics, good fit socially, and then ultimately also a good fit financially. It used to be that perhaps there were people who would say, well, we can go to any college at any price. But I think that has changed now, where most people are also looking at the finances. So our goal is to create a school list. So when should we have our school list available to us? Well, earlier is better from a planning perspective, right? So if I know that these are the 7 schools we're interested in, we can start planning based on that school list. Now, the challenge, of course, is students need to grow up and students need to be ready to start figuring that out. So obviously working with a 6-year-old about what college they want to attend doesn't make a lot of sense. So I understand that for many families, some students are more ready to work on it earlier in their high school, and some students are not willing or capable of figuring it all out, perhaps even until their senior year of high school. So that's one piece of the puzzle you're just going to have to work with. If your student, can start working in the sophomore or junior year, great. If your student is not really there yet, well, then you need to come up with some sort of strategy where maybe you can start working around that problem or do something to get the student motivated and getting them to be part of the process. Why do I say that? Well, ultimately, our goal is to have a school list pretty well worked out by the end of the junior year of high school. You're going to be filling out applications and pursuing the colleges you're interested in the fall of your senior year. And if we have a good working list, and again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but if you say, well, here's 6 schools we're interested in, and later on in the process you add 1 or 2, or later in the process you realize 1 or 2 are not a good fit for whatever reason, and you take them off, that's fine. But I think you need to have a pretty good working list by the end of the junior year. So a lot of people say, well, if we're building a school list, how do we do that? What should be on the school list? Well, first of all, how many schools? Well, there's no right or wrong answer for most of these questions. It's going to be a little bit based on your student and your situation. Some people would use strategies where we say, let's have reach schools, target schools, and safety schools, where we have, 2 or 3 in each category. And that's certainly a legitimate strategy. Now, that strategy essentially says, if you haven't heard of it before, that you may take a couple schools that are a reach, either academically or financially, where, it would be great if those schools worked out, but in a lot of cases, they're not going to work out. Either the student's not going to get accepted, or the money's not going to come through, or whatever reason, those schools were a reach. And we knew that going in, that it wasn't likely that it was going to work out, but we wanted to give it a shot. I see families doing that with, as an example, the Ivies. I don't think we'll get accepted at the Ivies, but we want to give it a shot, so we're going to turn in an application. Or some other dream school where you say, well, I don't know, don't think we're going to make it, but, we're not going to end the dream yet. We're going to give it a shot and see what happens. So I've seen many people do that, not just at the Ivies, but certainly at a local flagship state school or other colleges that are kind of a high priority, either for the student or the family. Maybe it's mom and dad's alma mater or other reasons where you might put that school on even though it's a reach. Then we have target schools. Target schools are schools that are a good fit academically and financially. And it seems like if these schools worked out, they would be a great opportunity for the student. And they're, again, kind of what you're targeting. And then again, a few safety schools. A couple schools where if everything falls apart, and all the other schools where you're very confident that you'll be accepted, and also very confident that the financial side of things will work out. Another strategy that I've had families use is a little more, again, a shorter list where they just pick the 2 or 3 local schools because they have kind of a local kid. If your student is saying, well, I don't think I want to go too far out of the greater Chicago area, if that happens to be where you live or whatever it is, and you say, okay, well, if I'm not going to travel too far, these are the 5 or 6 schools that are available to me that have the majors I'm interested in, and I'm able to be, I'm a good fit as far as academics where I'm pretty confident I can be accepted. And based on those 6, I'll narrow it down to 3 and we'll be done. And there's nothing wrong with that. Now, I've had other people, as working on the list, are saying, well, we want to go all over geographically. We're interested in Ivies on the East Coast and, some prep schools on the West Coast, maybe Texas. And we've got, grandma lives in Florida and we have aunts and uncles elsewhere. How can we make this all come together? All right, so that's school list. Our ultimate goal, again, is to have something to work with so that we can go on and start looking at things like the scholarship plan and the financial plan that we're going to talk about in a few minutes. But having a good working list so you understand things like what types of applications. If you're applying to high-end schools, they may require a lot more essays, and the work involved in getting accepted to these schools will be much more, and the student may need the summer to plan and prepare for that. Also, financially, we want to understand what we're up against so we have time to work on that. So having a good working school list is helpful for many reasons, plus it takes the pressure off. For most families, you do not want to be doing all of your college planning in just the senior year. So, and I've said this many times, is start early so you have time to plan and it takes a little less, a little less pressure on the whole family. All right, so that's the school list. So in order to support the school list, we really need to build two plans, the visit plan and the test plan. So let's talk about the visit plan. So the visit plan is how you're going to gather information from the colleges you're interested in. And typically families do that by going to visit. So a visit plan would be, again, thinking through, well, what colleges are we going to visit? When are we going to visit? How many schools should we visit? All that kind of thing. Visit planning for many families is done in the junior year. So the junior year of high school, you start deciding what schools you're interested in. Now, if you've got a go-getter student that is interested in a lot of different geographic areas, wants to visit a lot of schools, you may start earlier in your junior year or even the sophomore year. But the visit plan is all about, putting that on your calendar and figuring out how I'm going to visit, when I'm going to visit, what we're going to do when we're there. So in other podcasts, we've talked about a visit plan. I'll put visit planning in the show notes as far as the types of visits as well. But as we work through the visits, we need to make sure that we're coordinating it with our test plan. So what is our test plan? Well, our test plan is whether or not we're going to take the ACT or SAT, how many times we're going to take it, and what our strategies might be to prepare for the test. And again, I think the visit plan and the test plan kind of need to work together as well. And let me give you a couple examples. So if you're visiting schools that ultimately require relatively high test scores, then you need to work on getting the test scores required to be accepted. If, on the other hand, you're just going to take the test once and be done, and you're going to have to choose schools and visit schools based on the test score. So the question becomes, are you going to test and plan to get into the schools that you're visiting, or do you want to visit the schools that your test scores indicate you can get accepted at? So again, an example here in town, a lot of the people I'm working with will consider University of Wisconsin-Madison, which is our flagship school, and it's a great choice. I mean, it's a highly rated, strong school right in our backyard. People in this area get in-state tuition, so you can't go wrong if it's a good fit for your student. But in order to be accepted at Madison, you need to have an ACT score of about 28. Now, if you're testing and your best score so far has been a 26, I guess you have a decision to make. You can take your chances and hope you get accepted on a 26. You can improve your test scores and try and get a 28 or 29 so you're more likely to be accepted. Or you can change the school list and say, you know what, I'm going to visit and prepare for different schools. And what you do, depends on the family, depends on the student. How many times have you tried the test? Have you prepped in between? All that kind of thing. So getting back to the visit planning, we do need to integrate it with our test planning. And we'll talk a little bit more about test planning in a minute. But in addition to the actual visits that we can also do things like college fairs and talk to college reps as they come and visit the high school. So there's a lot of alternatives to physically going to the college and visiting. There's also virtual tours, which I've covered in a previous podcast. And that podcast would be number 18, Virtual Campus Tours with Chris Carson. So that's another alternative to the visit planning. So you could, again, deciding how you're going to visit, where you're going to visit, and how you're going to visit is all very important. Testing, again, are you going to take the ACT or the SAT? Are you going to prep in between? So as we start moving into the test plan, now we really need to start, again, figuring out the process of how many times should we take the test? Is it available at our high school? Should we take the ACT or the SAT? Again, for those of you that are new to testing, ACT is a test that's very popular in the Midwest and the Middle South, and the SAT is very popular on the East Coast and the West Coast. In general, it doesn't matter that much which one you take. Again, it might be a matter of convenience. And I have had some families take multiple tests in both styles in order to determine which type of test the student can do better. So again, if you're really shooting for the stars and you want the best possible test scores, you could take the SAT and the ACT, figure out which type of format works best for your student, And then from there, focus on that particular test and then take additional tests and do test prep in the style that works for you. That's pretty rare that students would work that hard on their testing. More typical would be to focus on the test that is popular in your area. So let's say you're in St. Louis. ACT is probably the core test. So you take the ACT 2 or 3 times because it's convenient. It's lots of test locations. A lot of test prep in the area focuses on ACT because that's what most people take. And you just are happy with the test that you're pursuing. Now, that leads us to test plans. So what might be a typical test plan for a family? Most students are going to take the ACT or SAT 2 or 3 times in order to, do the best they can on their test. Most students may do some sort of prep in between tests. Now, that prep could be free online resources. That prep could be a class of some sort, often offered at the high school you attend. And sometimes that prep could be one-on-one tutoring, and where you spend, a substantial amount of money in an effort to get your test scores up. And again, spending some money in order to get test scores up may make sense because higher test scores can lead to better scholarships or can lead to acceptances at colleges that you really want to attend. There is a lot of politics around, well, why does everybody spend so much money to prep for tests? And I guess the short answer is you need to do it because your competition is doing it. And if your competition gets higher scores because they prepped, unfortunately, you may need to prep just to keep up with the competition. So again, a typical test plan might be we're going to take the test in December of our junior year. From there, we're going to assess our scores and determine if we're going to get involved in a class or not. And then we'll take it again in April, and hopefully that April score will be strong and we're done. But if that April score doesn't turn out as good as we would like, then we can take it again on the June test. And then for some families, if you're still scrambling, you can take it into your senior year in September or October of your senior year in order to get one more try at the test and perhaps improve your score. So that's, again, a typical plan. Some families, it might be just once and done. We're going to take it once in February. That's all we're interested in doing. And we're going to live with the score, whatever it might be. And again, for some families, that test score isn't that pivotal. If you get what you need to get into your local state school, and that's the school you're very interested in, then if you get that score, the first try, you can be done. So again, understanding what your opportunities and what your plan is with testing. And then coordinating the test with the visit. In other words, if I'm testing and getting these types of scores, should I be visiting those types of schools? Or conversely, if I'm visiting these types of schools and my scores aren't there, should I be doing something to try and improve my scores? So those kind of work hand in hand. And the other challenge with that group is you need to understand your student, and the student is very much involved, obviously, as far as how much effort they're going to put in and what targets or what their goals are. Like the driven student that wants to go to the expensive private school might be more driven to work hard on test scores and do more visits and work harder in order to get the finances to fall into place, as well as get accepted at that particular school. All right, so those are the first 2 plans. Next, we have the 2 plans that surround the money side of things. One would be the scholarship plan. And I've talked quite a bit about scholarships in a previous episode. We have 2 episodes, episode 5 with Kim Stazala, who literally wrote a book about scholarships, and also episode 43 with Monica Matthews. We cover a lot of scholarships information as well. Monica Matthews calls herself the scholarship mom. So those are 2 great resources to learn more about scholarships. And then finally, I'll put a plug in here for my scholarship guide for busy parents. You can go to tamingthehighcostofcollege.com/scholarships, and there's a free resource there where you can watch 4 videos and learn more about scholarships and help you determine what type of scholarship plan is going to be a good fit for you. So that's where you can learn more, but let's jump into a little bit more about some of the basics of scholarships. So for a lot of families, I always tell people that I've had, 5 or 6 families work scholarships really hard and have money to show for it. In other words, they won 2 or 3 or more scholarships, and those scholarships were substantial enough to make their efforts worthwhile. And some of these families are applying to 20 or 30 or 40 scholarships, and they're winning multiple scholarships. And that's great. If that's something that your family wants to pursue, by all means do that. But I've had a lot of other families come to me and say, my student's not that motivated, they're not going to work that hard, or we're running out of time, we don't feel like we have time to do scholarships in addition to all the other stuff we're supposed to be doing. Or our student isn't very unique, so our student is not going to stand out on a scholarship application. So there's many reasons why a family might do less than an all-out scholarship search. So many families might need to just do a basic scholarship search. In other words, you find 3 to 5 or maybe 10 scholarships that are very closely associated with your student and your family and call it a day and not spend a whole bunch of time. And then, of course, there's many families that aren't going to do anything at all when it comes to scholarships, usually because they run out of time or they don't understand what the opportunities are. And before they know it, it's the opportunities for scholarship has come and gone. So building some sort of scholarship plan and determining, if I'm going to apply to 20 scholarships, then I need to sit down and figure out how we're going to apply to them, when we're going to apply. It's going to be a family event, most likely, where mom and dad may need to help with applications or searching and finding scholarships and keeping things organized. But again, where I've seen scholarships be most successful, mom and dad put in as much time as the student, often not doing what the student needs to do. In other words, hopefully mom and dad did not write the essays, but mom and dad helped search for the scholarships. They were there for support. They blocked out time to get it done. Perhaps they put some incentives for the student. But you can learn a lot more about scholarships by listening to one of those previous podcasts. And then finally, we have the college financial plan. And the college financial plan is how we're going to pay for college. Are we going to pursue need-based aid, merit aid? Are loans an opportunity? What about scholarships? Are we going to choose an expensive school or a low-cost school? Are we likely to get aid and scholarships at the schools we're considering? So the financial side of college is the last thing that parents need to work on. And this can be relatively independent of the other plans in some regards, but it also starts to interweave together as well. So if you've got a high school freshman or sophomore, you can start on the college planning on the financial side, even though your student's not really ready to jump into visiting schools and that type of thing. So you do some college financial planning as preparation for overall, attending college. So you're going to prepare by saving and investing or determining if you're going to qualify for need-based aid. But just focus on the information you do know relative to the family. You know approximately what your income might look like. You know approximately how much you've saved and invested. You know how much you can afford to continue to save and invest, or maybe you can ramp up your saving and investing. So early on, you can start planning that does not require the student to be involved. And then as you work through the visits and the testing, you'll have a better understanding of the financial side of things. So financial prep is important. So when you go on a college visit, you can talk to financial aid offices and understand what they're talking about when they talk about need-based aid and merit aid. Understanding what's going on with scholarships helps you ask the right questions when you're visiting a school about their scholarship programs and what they offer. So working on the financial plan early makes a lot of sense for many reasons. But again, it also integrates with your visits and your testing and understanding the whole process. All right, so that's the 4 areas that I start with families as we jump into the college planning process. Now, if your student is relatively young, sophomore, junior, you have a little bit of time and you can kind of roll into this as needed and start working on it and looking ahead and saying, all right, well, we're not quite ready to take the tests yet, but we have an understanding of how they work, and when the time comes, we'll jump and do it. Now, if you happen to have a late junior or senior, perhaps you're thinking about these areas and saying, some of these things we've done and some of them we haven't, and some of them might be water under the bridge. If you're late in your senior year or even middle senior year, it might be too late to take tests and retake tests. You might have to live with the test scores that you have, assuming you've taken the test. If you haven't, of course, you need to scramble and get it figured out. But again, all this planning, if you have got time, you can work on it. If you don't have time, don't panic. Just pick up the pieces from wherever you are and kind of lay it out from there. In other words, should we be doing visits? If we should, let's get them on the calendar. Find some time where the student's available and mom and dad are available, and come up with a plan where you say, all right, we don't have time for 10 schools anymore. We're only going to be able to visit 3. How can we make that work? Scholarships, the same thing. Some families miss the boat and they just let it go and they're fine with that. Other families, do some last minute work and they're able to find a scholarship or 2. But every family kind of needs to pick up the pieces, start working from wherever they happen to be. And if you've got time, great. I encourage you to take advantage of that time. If time is running short, don't panic. Again, do the best you can. And, plug into this podcast, listen to what you can, visit the free resources we have on the website at tamingthehighcostofcollege.com, and just go to work. All right, let's wrap things up. Hopefully you've learned a little bit about planning and preparing for college today on my solo show. If you guys have any interesting topics or questions that you'd like answered on this podcast, I would love to get some feedback from my listeners as far as what topics you find most useful, what topics are missing, if there's any particular guests out there that you'd like to hear from. Please send me some feedback. You can send me email at brad@tamingthehighcostofcollege.com. And I'd love to hear from you as far as what we're doing and how we're doing it and anything else that I can help you with. As always, show notes are available for this show at tamingthehighcostofcollege/74 for episode 74. So you can go there and you can get links to all the things that I mentioned in this podcast. That's all we have for today. I look forward to talking to you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Now it's time for you to take action. Head to tamingthehighcostofcollege.com for show notes, bonus content, and to leave feedback for Brad. The next step on your college journey starts now.
Brad Baldridge is a registered representative of Cambridge Investment Research and an investment advisor representative of Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Securities are offered through Cambridge Investment Research Incorporated, a broker-dealer and member of FINRA and SIPC. Brad owns 2 companies, Baldridge Wealth Management and Baldridge College Solutions. The Baldridge companies are not affiliated with Cambridge Investment Research.